Fashion Police Squad has no right to be as good as it is. Aptly shortened to FPS, it's a game that never takes itself too seriously, will meme the shit out of you in the most opportune moments, that being around 80 to 90% of the time, and for some reason has some of the most solid, consistent gameplay of any boom shooter that has come out in the past year or so. And I've got a big fucking list of these guys I'm looking forward to already. They've been perpetually in early access, or have a 2-year-old demo that gets updated annually. Look, it's nice to have a demo get updated with some of the latest development flares and new mechanics fleshed out, but come on, y'all need to hunker down and just finish your game already, please? Please? Multiple Games did not need to be told this, because almost a year after I played the Steam Next Fest demo for the game, they put their baby out August 15th with a launch sale of $18, and damn is it worth it. A wide variety of level design, a gameplay loop that has you alternating your arsenal at any given moment to match with the fashion crime, and an unadulterated love for both pop culture and gaming references sprinkled across the 13 main missions and 3 challenge levels makes this shooter stand out across your typical military grade or demon slaying sprees. You play as Sergeant Dez of the Fashion Police Squad, aptly shortened to FPS, when reports of fashion crimes are on the rise in Trendopolis. These crimes pose a great risk to the many citizens living high fashion lives here. Your partner over comms, Haley, joins you as you begin your investigation and fashion crime stopping action within the inner city streets. She has a knack for having you rush on site while she pulls back to provide assistance or support. Sometimes she just flat out excuses herself from the mission, as you're led by the mysterious voice of a man only known as Deep Coat, or you can call him DC for short. He harps pretty heavily on his brother in his first interaction with you, before he gives you any intel on the whereabouts of who's causing the uprising of these crimes. Your first main target, Hugo Baus, who owns his own company within the business district of Trendopolis. He's been deploying the Dole suits and many of the other fashion criminals you'll be coming across within the first 2 missions of the game. Right away, you'll find out your arsenal is not of the typical pump-action shotgun, nail gun, or RPGs. Instead, you start out with the To Die For, gun that holds 5 rounds in its chamber before having to reload. For criminals that are wearing too dull clothing, you'll have to blunt them with this fitting alternative to your standard issue shotgun. You get introduced to guys who, while they're not the most dull-looking creatures in suits, all of their sleeves and coats are just a bit too big on them. That's a no-no on Dez's watch, so you get to use the tailor-made gun that'll shoot pins at these overbearing suit wearers. This will give them the proper fit that they need. Then you've got these guys on electric scooters who honk their horns and bonk your loins. That was not intended to rhyme in the first place. The neon bras are mainly there to be a fast-moving annoyance that introduces you to your secondary firing mode on your shotgun, which drains out colors that are just a little bit too bright for fashion. When using the secondary fire on neon bras or bright red fire hydrants you come across in each level, you can charge a meter that'll power up your standard shells once full. All the weapons you get throughout the game will follow suit. All puns intended. The further you progress through the missions, the more tools of the trade you'll be exposed to, and you will also unlock secondary firing modes for each of them. The thing I like most about this system is it forces you to switch out between your different weapons depending on the fashion crime you're trying to solve. Socks and sandals, raving DJs with Bluetooth speakers, and Guy Fieri archviles, yeah, I said that, appear as part of the wide variety of enemy types you'll come across. Even for a game of this size with a team this small, they tend to get it a lot of time to uniquely animate each of these enemies and employ different mechanics with handling each of them. My first boss encounter with Hugo went nice and smooth, in that he barely let me get into his second phase before completely obliterating me. I should also mention that I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, hence the title of this video, and this game seriously brings the heat in terms of a challenge across the board. Speaking of which, let's just talk a tad bit about the difficulty selection screen and its nice touches to details on how the devs feel about you picking certain ones. If you stick with, say, the easiest difficulty of the game, Dez's trench coat doesn't accentuate a lot of style, and he almost is hunched over with his To Die For in hand. So, respectfully, don't pick the easiest difficulty. At the very minimum, you have to be on normal, or what is known as fashion is my passion. Dez has got good posture, not too overbearing of a style being shown off, and he's ready to bust some baddies in their speedos or gimp suits. That's foreshadowing, in case you were wondering. If you're well experienced in shooters and have done things like beaten Quake 2 on hard or Doom Eternal on Nightmare, that describes me, funny enough, you might be inclined to pick a you reap what you sow, but would be greatly confused as why there's a gnome over the head of Dez. Also, how does his pants not fall? The best option for peeps like you is make sure it's haute couture. Did I say that right? Can I look that up? I kind of want to look that up.
Haute couture. Haute couture. Haute couture.
Fuck. Make sure it's haute couture because my man has the red coat with black and gold embroidery all over it and the soon-to-be iconic Fab glove. Within the first 2 missions, you'll be introduced to a mechanic whereby solving enough fashion crimes will fill up this beater on the bottom of your HUD. And once it reaches 100%, you can press Q to activate it. Dez whips out his Fab glove, jumps and does a spin and pose in the air, doing all this extra shit, and he causes a stunning shockwave to anyone within range of where he lands while doing the fucking splits. Jesus. And all you have to do is aim in the general direction of an enemy, hit the fire button, and watch as Dez dashes across any arena you're fighting in to smack some fashion sense into these fools. The timer on it is also relatively friendly, so you'll be able to take out multiple waves of enemies with just one usage. There weren't many moments during encounters where I thought needing the glove would be essential for getting through, so it's mainly just another one of the many tools of the trade you'll be switching between on a normal basis. Things heat up literally and difficulty-wise once we get to the subway mission, as an informant of ours has suspiciously turned heel on us. The chase is on, and things like arena design and your brand new weapon, the squishin' wet ones, present new challenges and fun solutions to platforming and dealing with enemies. The primary fire on this gun is nothing special, and if anything, would probably be the worst weapon for that alone, if it weren't for the uses of the secondary fire. Charge your secondary fire by using the primary one, and then it becomes a limited super nail gun as it can affect 2 previous enemies on top of the brand new one introduced, the Flamer, aka the Guy Fieri archvile of this game. The resemblance is uncanny. The game introduces a mechanic on top of this that lets you wet the floor in front of you to get an extra boost with some of that game's done quick tech. You cover larger gaps to jump, environmental hazards like electrified train tracks, and make avoiding projectiles from enemies way easier. For those that wanted a dash button in the game, having the combination of the wet ones and the belt that stuns any enemy is a sufficient enough substitute personally for Doom Eternal dashes. To make another comparison to Doom Eternal, you're not always constantly micromanaging your ammo pools across different weapons in FPS. You have an infinite ammo pool, so the game takes away the focus on ammo management and puts it more towards the combination of different tools to handle each enemy type. With that in mind, a dash or double dash would probably feel a bit too overpowered without the constant need of managing your ammo pool. Speaking of Double Dash, this game is clearly made by people who know and love video games as much as the average consumer. On top of being a well-developed game, there are loads of pop culture references and, more importantly, video game references. Yep, just in the secrets alone, you get Duke Nukem, you get Tekken. Unfortunately, there's no Kessen in the game, so that's an area we can work on with a sequel. There might not be any Kessen references in the world, but something I can say this game does actually do right, compared to the mistakes these boomer shooters make time and time again, are the boss fights. You're gonna have to do the same basic concept in the end for all of them, which is a lot of shooting with the right weapons, but moving on from the first boss, things get more interesting. In the second boss fight, you're dealing with multiple phases split by varying challenges in these VR-like arenas or platforming sections. You'll be jumping across wide gaps on narrow platforms one phase, and then you're moving through a maze destroying power terminals in a similar vein to that of Wolfenstein 3D in the next. The bosses will usually force you to switch weapons across different phases, as they can change up their fashion style and clothes mid-fight, though usually not until you've cleared out their armor meter. The grand scale of the final boss definitely matches up to what I was looking for too, as you're learning its attack patterns, going through gameplay deviations across the many different phases, and an insane last act that ramps everything up to 11 until the very last hit. So now, here's some gripes I have with the game. It's not many and they're not detrimental to the time I had with the game, but these need to be pointed out because, look, I know y'all like to be all picky and specific when it comes to indies, and then you just flat out ignore glaring issues with AAA games. So firstly, the game has a very interesting concept of knowing when players want to skip cutscenes or dialogue when not to let them press anything. The very basic enemy introductions have no dialogue to scroll through and take up to 6 seconds max. It can be skipped but if you die before a checkpoint to a level, you'll be left having to mash E or left click to move through dialogue you've already read forward. This overall takes a lot of wind out of the game's sails when you're on the higher difficulties, needing to retry certain sections over and over again. On the topic of difficulty, while I myself played on the hardest difficulty and actively perpetuate the usage of that option, some enemy types can be a real pain in the ass to deal with under any and all circumstances. The flashing tourists use hit scan attacks that'll also blind you, making it very hard to retaliate when you're getting hit by them before knowing where they're placed. It also doesn't help when you've left their line of sight and come back to return fire. They have split-second reactions most of the time just to hit you immediately as you're coming out of cover. Thankfully, the sock gnomes stun and take care of these assholes in quick fashion. One of the many focuses the game has is on its platforming, and while the grappling belt of justice is super cool to use and it feels smooth for the most part, there are some sections that are a bit unforgiving getting through. Falling off platforms into a pit puts you back at the start of a section with less health, but there are times where it feels like I can consistently execute the same jump, but where I end up landing can be varied greatly. Challenge level 3 is probably the most demanding out of any of the platforming you can do in the game, with these issues popping up when you're getting spawned on the smallest of ledges without any room to prep for a jump. But this can be sidestepped as challenge missions are optional. While there are video and graphics options within the game that do better to affect your time in that of some AAA ports of 2003 games, the sliders are limiting in their options, as I couldn't even get the FOV slider to my most comfortable setting in most games, 110. It only goes up to 100, and the lowest setting is not really that far off from where it is by default. Another thing that struck me as weird was the inconsistency in explaining enemy mechanics the further you went into the game. Sometimes you could come across a new enemy and assume correctly a large percentage of the time when to use against them. Sometimes, like with this GJ that would constantly kill me with their insane AoE damage, the game just outright wouldn't give me any helpful information or tips on how to deal with her. I kept dying repeatedly on the first encounter until I just tried shooting her with the wet ones. Not once did the game acknowledge me doing such a thing. In the last phase of the second boss, a very specific situation occurs where if you're not actively paying attention to far off details on an object, wink wink, you're going to be completely lost on what the game wants you to accomplish to progress. It's crazy to think about this when the game was so damn good at explaining concepts at the beginning, only for it to almost get more and more lazy as we progress forward. Haley, come on. You've already got hundreds of excuses not to show up on any of our missions. You couldn't at least throw us a bone from time to time, especially on the way more difficult levels here? And to avoid sounding standoffish with my title and experience, you can switch off the hardest difficulty in the game if the subway level is posing too much of a threat. That, I feel, is probably the threshold for most players to decide if they'll progress forward with it or go down a notch or two before moving on. But never go on easy. Please, don't do that for me. I loved all the bosses as previously mentioned, but there is a specific issue I came across after a specific phase within the final boss that made my character's specific collision box act very weirdly with that arena, and it took until I got to the next checkpoint and died before that issue got revealed on its own. It was a pretty big annoyance, as this boss has multiple phases and mechanics that you'll need to remember how to do constantly if you're restarting from checkpoints a bunch. Spoilers, but after I completed the phase where the boss turns you into a neon bra temporarily, my character was moving through the stage as if his collision was underneath the floor, and speeding up with the wet ones didn't seem to work. It took until I took his armor down and got a checkpoint for that, and then died for the game to fix the collision on its own and place Dez back on the map as normal. So as it stands, I did not have to end up beating the game with a strange bug or glitch active, but it was also still pretty damn annoying to go through. Well, here's an addendum for you for this video. I've never done one of these before, but as of releasing this video, there's been a version 1.0.5 that it deals with a lot of the issues that I've presented in the previous section, like skipping dialogue, certain things with the collision on the grappling for the belt, anything related to that sort of thing. I did not test these things myself, but it looks like they are actively pushing patches and bug fixes on the game as it's out there for release already, so good on them, good on the devs. I'm just wondering if they fixed that one weird issue I had in the final boss. Lastly, the aesthetics and music of the game. They're what you should expect from these types of games now. It's a mix of 2D sprites with 3D environments. This helps character design stand out, character portraits, they're not fully animated, but it's obvious that Dez is the gunslinging swag cop, while Haley is the straight-laced officer best used as a support for Dez. Unless you're later in the game in which she's just fucking useless. Like, what's she doing? She's just driving this car? Is that all she's gonna do? Hasn't she been driving the whole game? Secrets also have you finding posters of Dev in different outfits from both pop culture and gaming culture. And these, honestly, make me very thankful they went with the design they currently have for him. The weapons don't intrude on screen space, while also accentuating their different designs to make sure they all stand out from one another. Other portraits used in-game are passable, just the overall character art is very good personally. Music is not going to stand out like a Doom Eternal or a personal favorite of mine, Hylix 2, but it's never off-putting or misplaced in the midst of all the action you're getting yourself into. The game may or may not be on sale still once this video hits the virtual shelves of my YouTube channel, but I obtained it during the launch sale for 18 bucks. The OST is an additional 9 bucks for those who want to provide support for the devs. Overall, the package you get here is well worth the price, even at its normal $20 price point. Smacking some fashion sense into dull suits is something I never thought I could be fun in this format, and yet here I am with my latest video. Time after time, working on many other scripts these past few months with no output to boot, I've come to realize I just need to put the work in if I really want to see results. Even when the video editing software caches half the time, or when familial obligations keep me from streaming my first playthroughs of the many games I've played over the past few months, 2022 has so far been a pretty outstanding year for gaming, if you ask me. And it does not look like it's going to be stopping anytime soon. Whether or not you'll see more output from me remains to be seen, but one thing is for sure, I'm probably around anyway, even when my channel might be presumably dead with a capital T at the end. That's debt. Debt. Not in debt. That I'm actually covering that right now. I'm paying off my current student debt that I've accrued over the past almost 7 years, and that looks like it's gonna get paid off. I don't want to throw out that energy or promise into the air like that, but I mean, it's looking pretty good for me. I don't know. I'm not gonna flaunt it, but it feels pretty nice to finally be able to let that go this year as I move on and forward with whatever else I want to do with my life, you know? Game dev has been an interest of mine for such a long time. These videos, while not very consistent, they've been really fun to make whenever I got the inspiration and the drive to do them, you know? It's just, you know, video editing isn't my thing. If I could find somebody out there to edit the video parts of this out for myself, then I would be greatly appreciative, but of course that comes with monetary value, and I'm not ready for that commitment. So anyway, that's it. That's my outro.